I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Top 5 Tips for Microsoft Excel. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our featured presenter today. He is a Microsoft certified trainer and an instructor for New Horizons. We are very excited to have him join us today, Mr. Tom King. Tom, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Top 5 Tips for Microsoft Excel. Excel remains the go-to product for people looking to store and analyze data. Although every Excel feature has a use, no single person uses every single Excel feature. So after searching multiple websites that surveyed hundreds of Excel users, I've put together a list of the top 5 tips for using Microsoft Excel. Number 1, kind of a surprise, is Paste Special. Copy and paste is one of the most simplest and probably most used functions in Excel. But we often carry over formatting that we don't want, or we copy a formula when we just want a value. These little frustrations can take time to fix, which is why Paste Special is just so special. After you've copied your cell, and there's several ways to do that, my favorite is the keyboard shortcut, Control-C. Then you can simply press Control-Alt-V or go to your clipboard group under the Home tab of the ribbon. Or you can do an Edit Paste Special to bring up your Paste Special and then make whatever selection you would like. Also, Alt-ESV is a shortcut just to paste values when you're working with formulas, which is probably the most common use of Paste Special. So I'd like to show you an example of using Paste Special. I've got an Excel workbook. Let me go ahead right now and zoom in. And I've got a block of data. As you can see, my data has a little bit of formatting with it, and I do have a totals row for data. So let's say right now, one of the things that when I'm copying information, a common issue you run into is if you set columns to be a specific width, copying and pasting doesn't always do that. So let's say, for example, I'm going to select my first block of information, and I just want to get my regions and consulting. Right now, I'm just going to click the copy button on my ribbon, put that on my clipboard. And now if I paste that into some other document, let's say, for example, I create a whole new blank workbook. I want to make sure that that data matches the column widths. So by going under Paste, you can see I have a variety of pasting options. So my pasting options include just a regular paste, pasting just formulas, pasting formulas and number formatting, keeping my source formatting, pasting with no borders, and this is a cool option I like, keeping source column widths. So that way that data is exactly the same size as I need it, and it saves me having to constantly re-fit my columns. Another important option for me is when I'm working with things like formulas. As you know, when you're working in Excel, when you create a formula, if you do a straight copy and paste, what you'll often do is be copying and pasting your formulas. Sometimes, of course, what you would rather do is to just simply copy and paste the values created by those formulas. So again, I can start by selecting my total row. Again, I want to copy that. And now I want to go under Paste, and then I can open up my Paste Special. Again, note when I hover over it, I do see my Paste Special keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-V. And this opens up my Paste Special dialog box. From here, I can tell it what I want to paste. In this case, I'm going to choose the values. Then I'm going to go ahead and move my cursor to another location. Tell it I want to do my Paste Special. I want to paste the values. And then if I actually take a look in my formula bar, those are actually now the numbers and not the formulas. So a lot of times, even if I'm doing something like text and I'm using concatenating to put a string together, at the end of the day, I want to simply convert that back into just normal text. So I often would do a Paste Special. Another tip that I like a lot is if I have imported information and I would like to see this in an entirely different way, maybe if I'm going to later use a lookup function. So at this point, one of the things I would like to do is to select my block of data, and then I want to flip this around so that my sales groups are my column headers and that my departments are my rows. So again, I'm going to do a copy, and then I'm going to place my cursor on another empty random cell. And then under my paste, I'm going to choose the transpose option. And that becomes a very quick way to simply flip data around. So again, these are some of the different ways that you might want to use your paste special rather than just doing a straight paste. Second tip, adding multiple rows and columns. Very often, when you are editing stuff in Excel, you need to make room for additional data. Now, of course, there are several ways that we can add columns and rows, but sometimes, of course, what you may need to do is to add multiple columns and rows. Certainly, you could do it one at a time, but that could be pretty tedious. So I want to show you a couple ways that we can actually start adding multiple columns and rows. One of those is to use a keyboard shortcut. So I'm going to flip over to my Add Columns and Rows worksheet. And let's say I need to add a new employee that's just joined my team. So I want to add a new row to my data. Now I've got several ways to do that. I could go to my Home tab on my ribbon. I could tell it I want to go to my insert and tell it I like to insert a sheet row. I think most people right click and tell it they like to insert. There's another way to do that using my keyboard shortcut, and that's Control Shift Plus, and that's the way that I can quickly insert a new row. That would also work if I needed to insert an extra column. I can select the column and do Control Shift Plus. But what, of course, if I need to enter multiple columns and multiple rows? Let's say, for example, I have 3 new employees joining my team. I want to put them in the middle of my list. So I can select all 3 rows at one time. And by doing my same keyboard shortcut, Control Shift Plus, it would insert the number of rows that I've had selected. That has saved me a ton of time when I'm having to edit an Excel workbook. I'm going to do my Control-Z keyboard shortcut then to go ahead and undo that. And another nice option if I need multiple columns, again, I'll just choose my columns, Control Shift Plus, will allow me to insert the number of selected columns. On a related note, in Excel, if you happen to be doing a particular task like inserting columns or rows, if I decide I need to do another one, rather than using my keyboard shortcut, I can use another shortcut. This is the F4 key. F4 is a repeat key, and that would allow me to keep manually inserting the number of rows. Number 3, conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is a tool that enables you to highlight cells with a certain color, a value, different ways of displaying information depending on the cell's content. But sometimes the built-in formatting rules just don't quite do enough. So one of the things you can do is you can actually add your own formulas to a conditional formatting rule to give it a powerful boost to help you do the things that your built-in rules can't. So I like to use conditional formatting when I like to highlight different kinds of the information on my screen. This will help me organize it, and this also can provide a nice alternative to doing something like a chart when you need to perform data analysis. So I want to start by showing you some of the built-in rules And then I'd like to show you the power of using a formula when you need to highlight conditional formatting options. So let's say I have, of course, on this document, my sales ledger. I show my individuals and I have their total sales. Let's say that we had set a sales goal of $100,000, and I would like, of course, very quickly to see the $100,000 items in this list. Being a visual person, I'd like to see those highlighted on the screen. So, of course, I'm going to start by choosing my cells to which I want to add my conditional formatting rule. Then on my ribbon, I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to look in my Styles group, and then click the arrow for conditional formatting. From that drop-down list, I can see my various conditional formatting categories. They include highlight cell rules, top-bottom rules, data bars, color scales, and icon sets. In this case, this will be a highlight rule. So you can see my choices are to do a greater than, a less than, between, equal to, text that contains, a date occurring, and another really super helpful one is duplicate values. So right now I'm looking for something that's greater than. This will then open up the greater than dialog box for me, and the first thing I need to do is to set my target amount. I can do this two ways. I can either enter amount, or if I'd like, I can choose a cell reference to make it a variable. Let's say our sales goal may change on a monthly basis, so I'm going to set the target as the contents of C2. And then I need to choose my desired formatting. To help me out, Excel has a pile of built-in formatting options, such as light red, fill with dark red text. Typically not a good thing to use in an accounting environment. Nothing makes accountants more nervous to see any set of numbers that are highlighted in red. So since this is a good thing, I think I might switch to a more positive accounting color, such as a green fill with dark red text. If I don't like any of those built-in choices, from that same drop-down list, I can choose a custom format. And now I have a lot more options, such as how do I want my numbers displayed? What font and style would I like to use? Would I like to draw any borders around my cells? Or do I want to show different kinds of fills? My fill choices can include using theme colors. Theme colors, of course, are colors that show up in this list depending on whatever theme is attached to my current document. If I change themes, this color palette will show a different set of colors. If I need my colors to be constant, I can pick a standard color, and I can then tell it, of course, let's see more colors, and I can choose from either a grid of 256, or by going to custom, I can choose one of 16.7 million different colors. I use this a lot when I want to have something show up in the official New Horizons navy blue or red. I have the red, green, and blue formulas, so I can type the values to get my desired answer. Right now, I'm just going to click cancel, and then click OK to apply my conditional formatting rule. Now, this is always the thing with conditional formatting. You always want to test it to make sure your rule works. So I'm going to go right now to Prentice, and let's say I've had an update. Prentice's final tally on the year was 120,000. So with my conditional formatting rule, it immediately highlights the cell in green. So much nicer than physically highlighting yourself. I'm going to then take that back, change the value back to the 85, and note my conditional formatting rule disappears. You can, of course, apply multiple conditional formatting rules to the same block of cells. So if I would like to find the people that were under my target goal, I would just reselect my range, go back to conditional formatting, and then I go to highlight cell rules, but this time I'm going to choose less than. I will still use the default setting here of light fill, dark red text. And now I basically have someone that achieved a goal and someone that did not achieve a goal. Once you've applied a conditional formatting rule, you may want to manage that in some way. So I can go back to my conditional formatting command on the ribbon, go down to Manage Rules, and there, of course, I can see a list of the current rules that are applied to my selected range. So in this particular document, I can tell it, oh, I need to go back and possibly edit this rule. If the target amount changes, I can make a change by editing the rule, change value, change color. If I later decide a rule is no longer necessary, from the Manage Rule list, I can select it, choose Delete, and I have the single rule in place. Another very popular analysis is when you want to find something that might be above average. Maybe you want to see, like, say, a top 5 or 10. So what I would like to do, of course, is be able to see any numbers that are above average. I can do that very quickly by applying that as a conditional formatting rule. So I'm going to select G4 through G21. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting and then go back to my top and bottom rule category now. And here you can see my choices, top 10. Again, that's a number that can be customized. I would like to see the above average. And again, I'm going to change the formatting. I'll this time pick a yellow fill just to highlight those numbers. And now, without even having to calculate the average, Excel will show me what the above average numbers would be. If those sales numbers would change, the average would change, and so would the conditional formatting. When people are analyzing data, often they like to have a visual picture of their information, and a very popular method for that is to use a chart of some kind. If someone just wants a quicker analysis, one of your options might be to add a conditional formatting set of data bars. This basically mimics a chart that you'd see in Excel. So if I wanted to compare these numbers, their strength, I'm going to select my next block of data for my totals, go to conditional formatting, and then go down to my data bars. I have two styles, either gradient or a solid fill, and I have my choice of 6 colors. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose a solid fill, and I'm going to pick my orange type of color. And again, there basically would be my bar chart right on top of the data values. And of course, if any of my numbers change, that can automatically change the strength of the bar. So you might want to consider data bars the next time you need to do visual interpretation of data rather than going for a chart. Next, I'd like to show you how you can use formulas to help identify key pieces of information. In this last block of data, I have a list of employees and their years of service. What I would like to do is to highlight the employees that have more than 15 years of service. Now, I could certainly go to the years column and highlight the number that was greater than 15. But what I'm interested in is actually applying the highlighting to the name rather than the number. So I'm going to select my list of names. I'm going to go back to conditional formatting. And under conditional formatting, I'm going to choose a new rule. This opens up my new formatting rule dialog box. There I have a rule type. At the bottom of this list, I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. And for my formula, I want to do equal, and I'm going to use a $sign to lock a column reference, and I'm going to lock column O, and I want to start with row number 4, and then I want to say that whatever's in that cell needs to be greater than the number 15. Now notice I'll have to create my formatting. So again, I'll just highlight a color, and then I'm going to click OK to apply my rule. And then I click OK, And then again, what that does is quickly highlight for me anybody in my organization that has more than 15 years of service. I see the name is highlighted rather than the years of service. So these are some examples of different kinds of conditional formatting rules that you can use in Excel. Number 4, lookup functions. This is, of course, you use lookup functions when you want people to actually try to use Excel like a database. You have stored information, and then you want to use that stored information somewhere else. This is like writing a query to extract information in Access. There are a number of lookup functions you can use. There is the VLOOKUP, which looks up the value in one column and returns a corresponding value from another column. I like the index and match. They're the most widely used and the most powerful tools in Excel for performing lookups. VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP are very rigid in how the data must be structured in order to look up information. With index and match, they're much more flexible in trying to find our data. So on my lookup page, I have a list of stores. I have for each store information such as the manager, the tax rate, the city, the state. I then have a list of products that has a matching corresponding value, which is a store number. So first, I'm going to use just a VLOOKUP that looks up the store number, finds it in my list of stores, and then we'll find the state reference and drop it into the cell. So I'm going to start by going to C7. I'm going to click my Formulas tab on my ribbon, and then I want to click the Lookup and Reference group of functions. And then I want to use my VLOOKUP. And of course, there's my tooltip explaining what it does. And I want you to notice the limitation in the description. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table. So I'm telling it my lookup value, what is it I want to find? So I want to find more information about this particular store number. For table array, where is my data stored? So I'm going to choose my block of store numbers. And then in that highlighted area, which column has the data that I want? I want the state. The state would be the third column in my highlighted table array. So I'm going to indicate that it's number 3. And then I have what's called range lookup. And range lookup says, am I using ranges to identify my stores? If so, I'm going to enter a value that, yes, that's true, I'm using range lookups. And that means I could type a number 78, 79, 80, and they would all have the same data. Since my store numbers are unique, they're not ranges, I'm going to change that value to false. So if I don't type an exact store number in column B that exists in column H, I won't get a match. And now with VLOOKUP, it says that store 78 is located in Montana. I would then just autofill to copy that value, but I do have to make one last change, and that is in my original formula, I need to make sure that I make my set of stores absolute cell references. So again, I'd have to use my F4 key to automatically convert cell references into absolute cell references. And now I will be able to quickly copy all my stores. But let's say next, I wanted to get the tax information. Problem is my tax information isn't the leftmost column. That rules out a VLOOKUP. So instead, what I'm going to do is to use a combination of index and match. So I'm going to start by telling it I'm going to use an index. And an index, I need to tell it what column or data has the range that I want to include. So I'm going to be indexing the tax rate column. My tax rate column is going to be $G, $7, colon, $G, $11. Then I need to tell it where am I going to find the matching data. That's my match function. For match function, I want to take the information that's stored in B7, and then I need to match it in my column of data, which would be $H7 colon $H11. Now, because match is a nested function, I need my two closing parentheses at the end. And then it's able to actually look up the corresponding data, even though it isn't to the right of my store number. That's where people start using index and match. It's a much more powerful way of looking up information rather than VLOOKUP. If I only knew VLOOKUP, I would have to spend all my time cutting and pasting and moving the data in my source table or table array to fit the VLOOKUP restrictions. Index and match means I don't have to do that. Next, there was a tie for the fifth most popular feature in Excel. One of those is the ability to find and remove duplicates. A very common task in Excel is to manage multiple lists and be able to look for or remove duplicates in it. Excel has a tool that will do that for me. Also, I want to point out if I just wanted to see them, I could use my conditional formatting to tell it to highlight duplicate values. So, back in Excel, on my removing duplicate page, I start with a list of information. This is from Acme Hardware. And going through this list of products, people have been doing a lot of data entry over the years. I need to make sure that I have a clean list of products. I don't have any duplicates. So to check for my duplicates, I'm simply going to select my block of data. And then I'm going to go to my data tab on my ribbon. Under the data tab, I'm going to go to my data tools group. And in data tools, I can see remove duplicates. When I click remove duplicates, I now have my remove duplicates dialog box, and I have the opportunity to tell Excel what combination of data makes something a duplicate. Right now it says I have to have matching values in every one of these columns for something to be considered a duplicate. So right now I'm going to tell it that's fine. I click OK. Excel said it found one duplicate product, and now that has been removed from my list. The one flaw in this tool, as far as I'm concerned, it would have been very nice if Excel had highlighted the duplicates first before doing the removal. Now, I'm going to do an undo from in here, and I want to point out that I have a list of items: 3/4 inch pipe curve, 3/4 inch pipe curved, and 3/4 inch pipe curved. And with some of these prices, I can see that we have different amounts of data. One record is a duplicate, but one of those 3/4 inch pipe curve records is slightly different. You can see that I have different amounts on hand. So now, if I wanted to make sure that it would remove all the data, not just the one that it did before, in removing duplicates, I need to customize my column. So I'm going to tell it, no, the quantities don't really matter. To make this a duplicate, it has to just be the same product name, the same vendor, and the same unit price. Now when I click on it, found two duplicates and cleaned them up. So there's only one 3/4 inch pipe curve left. Probably the most common way that you'll use that is if you're going through a list of names to clean up. So if I had something that might be Smith, Ed, and Smith, Edward, that might be the same person. But again, if I told it had to be an exact match for first name and last name, you wouldn't be able to see that. I would point out, if my data is also stored in a table, table tools also have the ability to look for and remove duplicates. The last item, which is on part of my tie, is working with pivot tables. Now, you could write a whole book about pivot tables and what they can do for you. But generally speaking, they're used to summarize giant collection of data to make it much, much easier to parse based on different kind of reference points. So when I get started with a pivot table, one of the newer features in Excel is the insert a recommended pivot table. I find that can be a very, very nice time saver. So to show you a recommended pivot table feature, I have this block of data from Develitech. It's a sales ledger. In this entry, I see my name of my company or my customer, their location, region, who serviced the account, what they bought, when did they buy it, when did they order it, when did we ship it, how much did they buy, what was the unit price, and my total sales. And currently this is like 2,200 rows of individual data. It's nice to have all stored, but it doesn't really show me any kind of analysis. So let's say one of the things I would like to do is to actually see a list of my total sales broken down by region. So a pivot table can present that information to me. So to make my pivot table, I'm going to click anywhere in this list. This happens to be a named table. Then on my ribbon, I'm going to choose Insert. And in my tables group, I have a choice of pivot tables and the fairly new recommended pivot tables. So I'm going to start with a recommended pivot table, and then it gives me several options. I can see a sum of price by state, sum of total sales by region, sum of price by region, quantity by regions. So in this case, I might tell it, yes, I'd like to see total sales numbers by region just the way I wanted. So I'm just going to click OK. Excel automatically inserts a new page into my document, and it builds my pivot table. In my pivot table, I see my pivot table tools on the ribbon. In my field list, I see all of my columns. And in this particular suggestion, it has taken the region, added it into my row area, and then added my values. Because I'm using numbers, it by default summed up my total sales. That can be a super fast way to develop a pivot table. I have now found that when I need to use pivot table analysis, my first step is to take a look at those recommended pivot tables, because I just might find exactly the pivot table value that I want. Now, if you're wondering why pivot tables are called that, it's because I can easily rotate my data around. If I decide I'd like to see my list of regions running as column headers rather than rows, I can quickly pivot that data by taking rows, move it into columns, and now the list runs horizontally instead of vertically, or then I can move it back down to rows. If I want to further break down my data, I might want to see my products, add them into columns, and there I can break down that information. And I love the fact that I took more than 2,000 plus rows of data and broke them down into about 8 rows. So gang, that's a look at our top 5 features according to many Excel users.
Thank you, Tom. If anyone has questions, please feel free to type these in right now, and we'll stay on the line for a few minutes to answer those. I just want to mention that if you're interested in any of the material that was presented in this webinar, please reach out to your local New Horizons center for the more information. If you are not familiar with your local center, please log on to newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center that's closest to you. You can also log on to newhorizons.com to view the current schedule for any upcoming webinars that we are also hosting. Again, please note that the session is being recorded, and you'll receive a link later on today to share and review and pass along to any colleagues who were unable to join us today. Tom, we do have a couple questions here. Is the conditional formatting rules available for pivot tables as well?
Yes, you can add conditional formatting to a pivot table. You'd use the same process. All I'd have to do is just choose the data that I would like to actually change. So if I needed to highlight something again that was greater than 100,000, I could highlight the data and then simply tell it under my home tab of my ribbon, add a conditional formatting rule, highlight cells greater than, and there I'd have all my numbers greater than $100,000.
Okay, great. And the next question we have is, let's see here, to answer some of the questions we have in regards to the recording, yes, the recording will be provided later today. And other than that, Tom, I actually think that those are all the questions we have. Thank you again so much for coming and speaking on behalf of New Horizons. And we appreciate your time. Everyone, this concludes our webinar. You may now log off. Thank you again.
Thank you all, everyone.